Hi, good morning, everybody. Welcome. Can everybody hear me? Okay.
The mic's not on yet.
No idea.
The mic was on.
I'm not sure how to turn the mic on, but I can talk loud. Can everybody hear me okay? There we go. Okay, well, welcome. Good morning, and thanks for making your way here on a cloudy and rainy day. I came in from Florida, so my weather was quite different than it was when I landed here yesterday. So I'm just going to do a quick overview and a few housekeeping items, and then make our first introduction for our guest speaker. So all of you at the registration table, if you picked it up, if you didn't pick it up, you may want to, but there is an agenda for today and a time schedule. It does have also the internet code, so you may want to pick that up. I don't think it's displayed up there. The reason for, my name is Kelsey Roselle, and I am the Director of Sales for Digital Science in the North American Eastern side of the United States. And I have several colleagues here as well from Digital Science who please make your way during breaks and chat with anybody, ask any questions that you might have. If there's somebody in particular that you want to meet, come up to myself and I'll make that introduction for you if you don't know them. So the purpose of today is really to hopefully expand on and illustrate technologies that are out there to help with gathering research data. And today, research has moved beyond institutional and national boundaries and has become a really complex ecosystem. And this progression has, it's a natural progression, but it's given rise to a new set of challenges, because institutions today have more access to more data than they ever had. They're working with colleagues in different time zones and communicating in different ways and media. And there has to be systems and technologies in place that help to categorize this data, map this data, and make it useful for repurpose in other ways. And I think that all of our speakers today will be talking about what are some of those technologies out there that can help speak to and answer some of these challenges. So with that, I will bring up our first speaker, and this is Timo Hannay, who is the Managing Director and Founder for Digital Science. Timo?
Thanks very much, Kelsey. It's a real delight for me to be here. Unlike Kelsey, I didn't arrive from Florida, I arrived from London, so the weather was pretty much the same. It's quite a bit colder. So it's a real delight for me to be here. Thank you so much for coming along. As Kelsey said, I'm the Managing Director of Digital Science. I also am looking for a mouse so I can start my slides in a second. I was originally a research scientist, and that informs quite a lot of my thinking, as you'll find out in the next few minutes. I was a neurophysiologist working in Oxford and then in Tokyo before joining Nature, where I worked on their online activities and business for about 13 years. And then about 5 years ago, I left Nature Publishing Group to set up Digital Science, which was a spin-off from Nature, but is now a separate independent company. So that's sort of a brief background. And I really want to sort of talk about three things today that hopefully will inform and add to what's going to be the real experts who are going to be speaking during the rest of this event today. I want to talk a bit about the way that technology is changing our world, about the ways in which research itself is also changing, driven in large part by those technological changes, and about what we can do about it. And when I say we, I really mean those of us who support the research process but are not actually involved in research. So certainly, that's myself as you like, a scientific software, research software person, but also a scientific publisher. But I think it also applies to those of you who are librarians, people who work as administrators in universities, funders and so forth. So I want to try and draw out some general lessons as far as I can. And to do that, I want to start here. I want to start with Robert Boyle, fabulously wealthy Irish aristocrat from the 17th century, who's best known to us these days for Boyle's law of gases that we all learned at school. But I think actually, arguably, his biggest contribution to science and therefore to humankind was arguably his involvement in the establishment of the Philosophical Transactions of the Royal Society, which itself is arguably, and it is argued, the first scientific journal. And the reason why I think that's so important is that it was with the establishment of scientific journals that modern science came into being. Why is that? Because the journals gave the means for people to share their knowledge and discoveries with one another. Up to then, we had alchemists who kept their knowledge secret and to themselves. They were engaged in a fundamentally competitive pursuit of trying to turn base metal into gold. And with the release of these kinds of publications, it gave the means for people to be able to share and create a common body of knowledge that, in principle, at least anyone could refer to and anyone could add to. So I think it was with the release of these kinds of publications that modern science, as we know it, came into being. And it was enabled by a technological revolution, by Gutenberg, which was about 200 years before that, but it was enabled by movable type. And we're, of course, in the midst of our own revolution, not only brought about by the World Wide Web, but by network computing generally, by mobile communications, and so forth. And we're only 25 years into this revolution. If you take it from when Tim Berners-Lee originally launched the World Wide Web, even if you go back to the dawn of the internet or ubiquitous computing, we're still only 30 or 40 years in. And bear in mind that the first scientific journal didn't come around until more than 200 years after Gutenberg. So we're still a small way into this, but a lot has already happened. And a lot has happened in the outside world. If you Google 1990, look for pictures, you get this kind of stuff, right? So we've come a long way since Tom Cruise was then known for his looks more than his unorthodox religious views. He was officially the sexiest man alive. Michael Jackson was alive. Mobile phones were things you took photos of, rather things you took photos with, right? And just to show that some things never change, Germany were those soccer world champions. But this is, for me, this is when I was working in the lab, right? I'm not that old. Okay, I don't look that old, but this was when I was working in the lab, right? So, I go along to the library every week and scan the print journals. Some of my friends have started using email, but I hadn't at that point. That was a couple of years later. So an enormous amount has changed. Really, research and research communication has already been revolutionised in less than a generation. But we've still got a long way to go. I was involved when I was at Nature in many activities. Some of them, the most obvious ones, putting full text online, but also really trying to make use of the web as a network, not just as an information dissemination medium, not just as a cheap way or an easy way of shipping PDFs about the place, but how can we change the nature of scientific communication, research communication? So we experiment with various things, with audio and video content, with databases. We were publishing databases with social software, so wikis and social bookmarking services. And most of it didn't work that well, frankly. A lot of it we stopped doing, but we learned from it in a good sort of scientific empiricist mindset. And some of it has stuck around. Of course, the ability now to be able to access full text online, to be able to search across the literature, to be able to follow links between publications, from publications to data sets and so forth, is now pretty much taken for granted. So a huge amount has already changed. And it's driven by information technology, as it is in other domains of human activity. Right? I like this quote from Paul Brand, who's a West Coast technology investor. This is a quote from a few years ago, but not many years ago. He said, about 20 years ago, people noticed computers and TV were on a collision course and started to speculate about what they produce when they converge. We now know the answer: computers. Right? So computers kind of take over whatever they touch. I think probably the most obvious example of that is the phone. Right? These phones that we have, they're called phones, but they're actually computers. Right? We very rarely use, and certainly I very rarely use mine for person-to-person communication. I used it this morning to find this building. I had to call my colleagues to find out where to go. But that's rare. I normally use it as a general purpose computing device and communication device. So when we call them phones, they're really computers. Also, Mark Andreessen, another tech investor and actually one of the creators of the original graphical browser, Mosaic, he wrote an article a few years ago now, I think it was in the Wall Street Journal, that he called "Why Software is Eating the World." And this talks about, so not just computing hardware that we were talking about from the earlier quote, but software itself, right? Software really changes everything it touches. And I think that there was an interesting example. Some of us went out for dinner last night. There was an interesting example there, right? When we went home, we went to the station, we inevitably used Uber to summon a car. I think it's really interesting that a business that's grounded in the physical world, you can't think of a physical grounded in the physical world of taxis, right? And yet that too is now being completely revolutionized by software. So software really does change everything that it touches, and it's changing our whole world. And of course, science, and I'm going to focus particularly on the natural sciences here, because that's where I come from and I feel most comfortable talking about it. But I think I hope a lot of this is relevant to the social sciences, to the humanities and so forth. So I'm really talking about research when I talk about science. I'm talking about science writ large. But that's changing too, in lots of different ways, right? That would be a whole conference in its own right to try and cover this and do it justice. But let me pick 3 ways in which I think it's really changing fundamentally, and often driven by these technological changes. It's becoming more collaborative and global, it's becoming more automated and digital, it's becoming more data-driven and software-driven. So let's look at each of those. Increasing collaboration. We're moving from a world in which most science, when I was in the lab, 20, 25 years ago, this was the way it was done. It's what I would call cottage industry science, where you've got a small group of people in a lab, usually in one physical location, and they're doing everything from, dreaming up the ideas and designing the experiments, conducting the experiments, collecting the data, analysing the data, drawing out the insights, writing up the results, right? And that's all done within one small group of people. And we're now moving to industrial scale science, right? We're moving to global collaborative initiatives where people work across time zones, across geographies to collaborate on huge projects for gathering data and understanding our world. And that's been enabled by technology, but it's also been made necessary by the kinds of questions we now need to answer, at least in the natural sciences. So there's some examples here from the biological sciences, an area that I'm particularly familiar with. There are some well-known examples in the physical sciences that I'll refer to a bit later. But for example, there's initiatives now to understand the brain, to understand the genome more effectively, and to look at cell biology and systems biology as well, are particularly interesting areas where now we have these big national and international initiatives to gather data on a scale that we just haven't been able to do before. Another aspect of increasing collaboration that manifests itself in the publications is the increasing length of author lists, right? So just last month, this is a report in Nature about a paper. This is not a paper itself, but a genomics paper with over 1,000 authors. Actually, most of whom were undergraduates. This sort of shows you how the way scientists are working is really changing, and in some ways, it's starting to break the kind of the existing method of communicating, and in particular, assigning credit for the contributions people make. Because one of the questions this begs is, well, what credit do you assign to each of those more than 1,000 authors for this particular paper? and what were the roles, because they're certainly not the traditional roles that we associate with being an author, which means you probably wrote some of the paper or co-wrote it with the other authors. Related to that, we're seeing increasing globalization. These are figures from a commentary in Nature, actually written by a colleague of mine, Jonathan Adams. And if you look at the left-hand column first of all, so the UK, what it's showing, the graph at the bottom is showing the increasing number of publications between 1981 and 2011 against the left-hand scale. So it's going up from about 40,000, 40,000, up to around 100,000 publications a year. And that's broken down into two groups. The bottom striped group are papers that have only British authors on them. And the top light blue green group is showing the papers that involve global collaboration, international collaboration of some kind. So you can see the total number of papers going up, but that's being driven mainly by increasing numbers of papers with international author groups on them. And the red line, which uses the right-hand scale, is showing the percentage of papers that have only British authors, right? So that's gone from, 80, 90% down to under half. UK papers now only involve UK authors. You get a similar effect in the US. It's a bit less pronounced because the US, of course, is a much bigger country with many more research institutions, so there are more opportunities than just national collaborations, but you see the same effect. And if you look at somewhere like Switzerland, it's more pronounced than in the UK because it's a small country. But the same effect is happening pretty much all around the world, other than in the emerging scientific powers like China, where you're seeing the domestic science take off first, but you'd anticipate that this kind of effect would then kick in those countries too. Increasing automation. So here are some physical science examples trying to balance the biology ones I showed earlier, but things like the Hubble Space Telescope, which itself is 25 years old this year, the Atlas detector at the Large Hadron Collider. These are the kinds of things that you can only have one or two of these in the world, right? Not every lab or every university can have a Hubble Space Telescope or a Large Hadron Collider, right? You can only do this kind of work through global collaborations. But the point I'm making here is that the science itself is becoming increasingly automated and computer and device driven. Down the bottom left, you've got some DNA sequencing machines. Actually, that's now a slightly out-of-date picture. But DNA sequencing technology has progressed much, much quicker than Moore's law. Right? The first human genome, which was published in 2001, cost hundreds of millions of dollars. And now you can, if you operate at scale, you can sequence a human genome for $1,000. Right? So we've come down many, many orders of magnitude in 14, 15 years. It's completely incredible. We've also got, here I'm going to try and see if I can show you a very short video. Bear with me a second. I need to... So this is actually a video of, it's Librarian, which is one of our products, but that's not the point. The point I want to show you here is just how people can work in the lab now. So labs are very messy analog spaces, but the way that you can now work in the lab is completely different from when I was there, right? So now what she's doing is putting up a protocol on her computer from her online account. She's now going to the bench to carry out that experiment. Now the tablet device, and this has changed everything for in wet biology and chemistry labs, right? The tablet device, you can take it to the lab bench, so now you can have end-to-end digital workflows. And she's now conducting the experiment using the protocol that's pulled down from her online account, but the device is helping her conduct the experiment, so it's helping her measure incubation steps and so forth. It can also help with inventory control, so here he's using his smartphone to scan a barcode so that he knows what stock he's got in place and which batches of which compound he's using in which experiment. You'll also see an example, I think is coming up next, of capturing, using smartphones to capture photographic data. So again, he's got a plate here, and he's now taking a photograph of that plate before it stores it away, and is associating that with the information, the protocol, and the other data from that particular experiment. Here, she's doing the same with some photographs from some microscopy work, and again associating. So you can bring all this information together and store it in one place. Here she's printing out a label, a QR code, and also label the sample before putting it away in the freezer, that kind of thing. So all of this information is now being integrated. Protocols, data sets, samples, inventory, and so forth. And it's making the lives of researchers much easier, and it's completely changing the way they work. I'm just going to stop right there because I'm in the background, and I'll move on. The data orientation of science and research is also reflected in various commentaries, such as this book. The Fourth Paradigm is a book to which many people contribute, including me. It came out a few years ago from Microsoft Research, or edited by people at Microsoft Research, and it describes a new type of science. And to explain that, let me explain why it's called the Fourth Paradigm. The first paradigm of science was empirical observation that arose in ancient Greece, 500 BC. That was Aristotle et al. Theoretical science then in the Enlightenment, when people start using equations to try to be quantitative about their observations and making their generalizations. So that's Newton. He listed these things that he thought we ought to be doing. We as publishers, as business people, as university administrators, as founders, and so forth, ought to be doing. I'd encourage you to have a look at this. You can find the Fourth Paradigm online. If you Google it, you can get the PDF of it free online. And it talks at the beginning about his vision. When I look back at this is pretty much a list of the things that we do at Digital Science, which is perhaps not a complete coincidence, but I didn't consciously follow his rules. But I think there's a lot of lessons for us here. A brief reality check. This vision of a big data, technology-driven form of research is not yet ubiquitous, right? Labs are messy, very analog spaces at this time. The technologies of choice in managing labs are often post-it notes, whiteboards, and for the truly sophisticated Excel spreadsheets. So we've still got a ways to go before we realise the potential of this approach. And it's also important to say that science, again, I'm particularly talking about the natural sciences here, really has challenges, right? There have been very well publicised examples of fraud in science, particularly in Japan, South Korea, but also here in the US and in every major scientific country. You could even go back to Gregor Mendel and say that the evidence now seems to point to the fact he's done these results as well. So fraud in science has deep roots. But I think it is rare. I think what's much more concerning and pervasive is the inherent biases that are now in the scientific process, right? So, and in particular, publication bias. People publish only their most interesting results, which may therefore be wrong. A leader in this space has been John Gieschen at Stanford, who published a number of papers on this, but one in particular, I think it was in PLOS Medicine, on why most published research findings are false. And that led to some mainstream media coverage, such as in The Economist. But it's now very real. I don't think it's an exaggeration, so it's a crisis in the natural sciences to say that there's a huge doubt now over the veracity of various scientific claims and over the transparency of the way that the scientific findings are made. But there's nothing there that we can't fix, particularly with the new approaches that technology affords us. I'll come back to that. So I just want to say a few quick words about how we set up digital science and why, because hopefully it will speak to this situation which all of us, as I say, publishers, librarians, funders, whoever you are, all of us who work to support the research process and looking for our position in this new world. How can we help it more effectively in a world that's now digitalized, that's now full of network computers, and where we can have end-to-end digital workflow from the lab end to the publications and mapping it. So we came out of Nature. We were thinking very hard about what the role of the science publisher is, and of course, science journals serve this need, which is to publish their to enable researchers to publish their exciting discoveries, and to enable other researchers to then learn about those discoveries. And that's super important, as I tried to explain right at the beginning, right? But it's just one small part of research, right? And if we think of ourselves not just as journal publishers, but as people whose job it is to help researchers with their information needs, to disseminate and to also retrieve and understand information, then we have many opportunities in this digital world to be able to fulfill that mission, to go beyond publication. So we started thinking about how can we help researchers in planning and preparing to do experiments and getting the training, for example, to do experiments. That's one of our products there, I'm not going to talk about it. How can we help them to conduct experiments more effectively? That was Lab Guru that you just saw in the video. How can we help them in sharing their results, interpreting their results, and doing that more effectively, both informally within their own research group and with the wider world, and ultimately when they publish? Back to the 1,000 authors and that kind of thing, how can we help researchers who are in the big global collaborative groups to more effectively author documents together, right, and to publish more effectively? And so that led us to think, we should be breaking out of that top left corner where we were as publishers and trying to support the activities around the research cycle. So we think of research as going on this cycle of reading the publications, doing your own experiments, drawing your insights, and ultimately publishing yourself in whatever form that might be. And whilst we don't want to pretend that you only ever need one of our products, because there's a lot of bases we don't cover, we want something to offer in every one of those major areas. And in particular, we want our products to be able to work well with one another, right? So we want Lab Guru, if you're using that to manage your lab, to be able to feed into Figshare so that the data you're gathering, the experiments you're doing in Lab Guru, can now feed into Figshare so that you can share them with your collaborators and then ultimately with reviewers and editors. And then to be able to feed into Overleaf so that when you come to write your paper, it's critical to pull out the data and to publish that alongside the prose and figures that could go in a traditional paper. We also want our products to be able to work well with others out there, right? We're now in a web world, right? Everything is connected, right? So everything needs to be interactive. And so we want our products to work well together, but also work well with other people's products in order that we provide the maximum utility to the researchers we serve. We've also got an area that's not related directly to research, but is around the reputation and career development of researchers. This is a very important area of publishing. So you publish in a journal not only to disseminate your results to others, well, that's the important part, but you do it also to get kudos for having made that discovery, right, to get the credit for it. And that's the important quid pro quo of journal publishing. There are also new ways in which we can make that a much more effective process in terms of tracking and assigning credit. So you'll hear more about all this later today, so I'm not going to dwell on it. But symplectic elements and metric are looking at research outputs. What are people generating, particularly publications, but not limited to publications? And then what kind of impact is that having? What kind of attention is that garnering? Not just quantitatively, but qualitatively, because there are different types of attention, not just different amounts of attention. And also looking at research inputs with Dimensions and Uber Research, which is one of our companies. So again, we can do a much better job here, not just, as I was describing earlier, with providing tools for researchers so that they've got better software for doing their job, but also for those who work to support the research process, administrators, funders, and so forth, to make, as it were, the management of science more scientific, right? To give them access to the data they need in order to be able to make their decisions. And so we sort of use this as an organising framework. We have the research cycle on the bottom and the career and reputation cycle on the top. And as I say, we don't pretend to have every solution to everyone's problems, but we like to have something to be able to offer in each of those major areas of activity. So we use this as an organising framework. I'm going to skip that one, but I just want to finish off by talking about how I think science communication will change. So I've talked about how research is changing. I want to talk, given my years in science publishing, and now in sort of scientific software, research software, I'd like to talk a bit about how it's changing. It's changing, again, in a wide variety of ways. But I'm going to pick three here to focus on. One is the concept of the publishable unit. There's often been a discussion about the minimum publishable unit, i.e. what's the minimum discovery you can make that gets you a paper, right? But I think there's a more important, as it were, development there, and I'm going to go on to explain that. Secondly, the distinction, which I think is going away, between journals and databases. We've got these two big domains with online research information, journals and other publications like monographs on the one hand, and databases on the other. I think we'll see those increasing blurring. It's already happening. And the other is the distinction between the research disciplines, which I think is also blurring in the world of the web. So let me just talk briefly about each of those in turn. Maximum minimum publishable units. So in the old world of publishing, there were short books like The Old Man of the Sea, and there were long books like War and Peace, and we sort of saw that as being the spectrum of options, because it wasn't really, it was very difficult to publish a book that was much bigger than War and Peace. Okay, you've got Encyclopedia Britannica, maybe that's the maximum size, right? Because of the physical constraints, right? It was very difficult to lug around a book that's bigger than War and Peace. And it didn't make much sense to publish a book that was shorter than The Old Man and the Sea, because by the time you printed it and bound it and shipped it off to someone, if they read it in 5 minutes flat, was it really worth all that effort? Okay, so we saw this as a kind of spectrum, if you like, and I've used the analogy here with the visible light spectrum. And I think in keeping with that analogy, as we move online, we now recognise, just as we recognise that the visible spectrum is actually part of a much broader spectrum of electromagnetic waves, we recognise that these kinds of publications, but the limits, if you like, were artifacts of the physical printing world, the ink on paper world, and now we have everything from the street to Wikipedia, right? That's a good thing, right? It's a good thing that we now have much broader range of maximum and minimum publishable units. And similarly in science, we have short papers like Watson and Crick's 53 paper on the structure of DNA, and we have long works like the Principia from Isaac Newton. But actually now, in an online world, we can have much shorter works. I think the minimum publishable unit will be 1 bit of information, right? You can change a piece of information in an existing database and make a contribution that way, right? And that might be literally 1 bit. And if that's a useful change, you should get credit for it. And similarly, we do have huge online databases. We effectively have online databases of the full genome sequence of everything that's been sequenced so far. And we're not very far away from sequencing every species that we know about, right? So we have enormous databases of information as well. So the mix of maximum minimum publishable units are as a concept, are going to be expanded in a similar way as I would trying to show in this slide to our concept of the electromagnetic spectrum. Journals and databases, as I said, in the world of online research information, there is 2 domains. There are the publications, particularly journals, at least in natural sciences, particularly journals, and databases. And I've shown here, I've just shown 3 examples particularly from the genomics and bioinformatics world. Of course, there are many others. And they're seen as sort of separate domains. But what's increasingly happening is a couple of things. One is they're learning from one another. So you see journals getting a little bit more database-like, more structured, providing more data and not just prose. And you see databases learning from journals, implementing the system identifiers like DOIs, in some cases applying peer review, in many cases professionalizing their, as it were, publication and promotion of their service. And we also see the rise of platforms, if you like, that are hybrid. So there's our own Figshare, but obviously there are others as well. That are on one hand databases, but not of the domain-specific, highly structured form that you see with, say, genome databases. And on the other hand, they are publishing platforms of the kind, but they're not really journals either. And so they're taking this hybrid approach. Also, what they're helping to do is to link one domain with the other, right? To link the journals with the databases. So that's one of the things that Figshare does. I'm sure you'll be hearing about it from Mark later today, so I won't go on that. So I think it's going to be harder and harder to tell a journal apart from a database. And in the end, hopefully we won't care about the distinction, because what we'll end up with are publication models that take the best of both worlds and apply them to what's needed in a particular domain. I think we'll also see a similar effect with research disciplines. So research disciplines have tended to be siloed, right? And that's reflected, I've got the Dewey Decimal System here as a sort of classic hierarchical organisation structure. In a room full of librarians, I'm not trying to tell you anything about it. But it's reflected everywhere, right? In the departments of universities, in the way publishing organisations, publishing companies are organised, in the way funders are organised, right? It's really intrinsic in the way that research is established. And yet that's not the way knowledge is, right? I mean, knowledge is much more like, on the right-hand side, where we see a network of research disciplines. It's one of the reasons why the web is so powerful. It's not just that it's immediate and cheap and so forth. The network structure of the web is a much closer reflection of the way that knowledge really is, right? Knowledge has as a network-like structure, in my view, not an intrinsically hierarchical structure. And so one of the challenges for us as organisations is how we break down barriers between traditional research disciplines. It's a huge issue, for example, for academic societies as well, that are often defined by the particular research silo that they represent. And I think that's an anomaly that's going to increasingly go away. I don't have all the answers to this, but I think this is an important aspect of the way that publishing is going to change. It's going to be less discipline focused and more, by current standards, more multidisciplinary, or even the meaning that will change over time. So I think science communication in the future will, as I said, encompass a vast range of publishable unit sizes, have the characteristics of both journals and databases, and blur the distinctions between research disciplines. The other thing that I think it will do, and this is coming back right to the beginning of my talk, is it will bring us closer. So whilst we, research and research communications evolved over the years hugely, it's hugely different from Boyle's time. It will bring us back in many ways to the founding ideals of the natural sciences in particular. So Boyle was a remarkable individual in all sorts of ways, but one of the things he was meticulous about capturing, for example, is negative results, what we've now called negative results, right? So he absolutely understood the concept of publication bias. And he was very, very careful to capture the results of every experiment he did, even if he didn't think the results were interesting or if he thought they were wrong in some way. So he was very honest about that. He also understood that not only that research needed to be done in an objective and unbiased way, but it needed to be seen to be done in an objective and unbiased way. He went to the length sometimes of inviting witnesses in to watch him do his experiments in order that it should be seen that he was not being biased, in order to perhaps guard against any unintended bias on his own part, right? Now, it's easy to mock that and say, well, it's not realistic, you can't publish everything you do, everything the experiment do. You can't bring people in to watch what you're doing every time you do an experiment. But now with new technologies, actually, we can get pretty close to that ideal, right? We can publish most, if not all, of the data we gather, so we can guard against publication bias. And even if you wouldn't get someone to sit and watch you do your experiment, we can get this technology to capture all the information as we do in the experiments, as we were seeing earlier on. And not only make the work of researchers more efficient and more rewarding, because they're not doing the drudge work of capturing every little piece of information, but also make the research process more transparent, which speaks to the crisis I think that we're having at the moment in transparency and reproducibility, particularly in the environmental sciences. And so I think in a way, technology, ironically, technology is bringing us closer to the founding ideals of science. And I think that's a great thing. I think it's a huge opportunity for us. And this was a major development in the evolution of science. We're now in another time in history where we're not only building on this past, but making a history of our own. So I think it's a hugely exciting time, and I think the new technologies can, as I say, bring us closer to the founding ideas of science and enable us to achieve the vision of the likes of Boyle. Thank you very much for your attention. I really appreciate it. That's all I want to say.
Thank you, Timo. I particularly enjoyed the throwback to the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and I thought about how technology would have made my life easy because I could have ordered the things on Amazon.com, and meanwhile I spent 4 days across 3 cities looking for Michelangelo for my son who's now 29. So, yeah. So with that, let me introduce our next set of speakers, and we are going to have Mike Winkler, who is the Associate University Librarian and Director of IT Services here at UPenn, and he'll be joined by Lauren Gala, the Science and Digital Initiatives Librarian, also here at UPenn. And they're going to give an overview of an implementation that they're doing right now with one of these technologies that Timo talked about. And so with that, Mike and Lauren, come on up.
Great.
There we go.
There we go. Got it. So perfect. I want to welcome all of you to Penn today. We really are happy to host this showcase by Digital Science. I hope you find it interesting, particularly as some of the founders begin speaking after we do. Lauren and I are here to talk a little bit about the work that we're doing with one product from the Digital Science Suite called Elements from Symplectic. But I wanted to just put it in context a little bit because we got kind of a stratospheric view of science and publishing and communications. And I wanted to think a little bit about what are the atomic levels. And there may be many components that go into thinking about scholarly communication, digital science, etc. And we're really focusing on an atomic unit called the faculty in this project. And we're really trying to capture activity that they do that reflects the work that they're doing, the scholarly work that they're doing, the research they're doing, the teaching that they're doing, and the communications ultimately that they're doing as well. So I wanted us to consider this thing that we're just terming the data ecosystem around faculty activities, and that there's lots of things going on out there. You know, they have appointments, they have job titles, they have chair, named chairs and things like that. They get grants, they do publications, teaching and mentoring students, a vast array of professional activities like being on editorial boards or contributing to professional societies. Their contact information, being able to get in touch with them in some kind of a way, some statement of their expertise or their research interests, the kind of material that they are claiming to be expert in. Their education, their background, their certification. We just recently learned about their licensure is very important as well. And I didn't really have another term for it, but just the hallway communications, the conversations that they have around the water fountain or in the lab or at conferences or even through electronic means, including probably Twitter and other kinds of resources as well. So there's all this activity that's going on. That faculty are doing, that researchers are doing, that evolve around their scholarly contribution. And there are products that come out of it. There are instantiations that you can touch, see, feel, taste, and manage in some way. Their CVs, bio sketches, their activity reporting that they do for their departments, their schools, their deans, research output, reporting that they do to funding agencies, putting things up on their website, just being able to go to a department website and say who are the faculty here and what are they working on, what are the labs that may be part of that effort. Being able to aggregate faculty activity up, either across institutions, let's say within departments, or beyond the campus itself, and to really begin looking at the domain of contributions that faculty are making. Which gets us into this relationship piece of the knowledge life cycle of how are things related, how are proposals put together, how is funding coming to faculty, is it a very collaborative kind of activity, and there are relationships not just between people, but between a variety of atomic features in this research cycle, pieces of equipment, other publications, data sets, all have relationships with what's going on. And then ultimately, as Timo noted at one point, we are trying to capture some sense of the impact that the faculty and researchers are having. So here in the Penn environment, all of those things are happening, and I get tired of saying this, oh, we're highly distributed, because whenever I talk to anybody else from a research institution, they go, yeah, so are we. It is a highly distributed kind of system. Typically there is no research czar that can determine how communications happen and how the faculty are organized and how they organize their work. So there's lots of data sources out there that need to be considered. Additionally, because data has increasingly become easy to move around, but many innovations have happened over the years where there were sticking points in data. So people did what was reasonable at the time. They replicated data, and they created a data source, a localized data source that met some particular need. And now they're really wedded to that data source. It does what they need, it does it really well, and they've corrected errors that were in the data. And you kind of wonder sometimes, why didn't they go upstream and correct the data up there? Why didn't they talk to their colleagues and say, shouldn't we really be capturing different kinds of data? But it's the fact that we live with, and certainly here with Penn, we find all kinds of little pockets of data that seem very similar, and then you start getting into it and you realize they're relatively different. And the data resolution is really part of that. Is they're trying to get at more granular kinds of activities that are relevant to individual researchers or departments or laboratories for schools. So we're working with our partners, the Perelman School of Medicine, and they have a system, FEDS, which is something like Faculty Expertise Data System or something like that. It's one of those systems that's been around so long, nobody really knows what it stands for anymore. It's just FEDS. And it was originally a system that was devised for promotion and tenure. So they captured a lot of faculty output so that they, during promotion and tenure activities, they could pull it all together. The administrators could consider it and they could make determinations based on that. But like any system that's been around for a long time and it has some useful data in it, they started finding other things that it could, it could drive web pages, that you could have a faculty web page and this would show the most recent publications that they had, those sort of things. So they started using it for lots of things. And about 4 years ago, we introduced Vivo here, which is a public-facing semantic web application for delivering activity data around what faculty and researchers are doing. And when we introduced that, we used the FEDS system as our source of data. FEDS is only used by the School of Medicine. And we wanted to, as the library, we really look at the university more holistically and see all of the disciplines. And in fact, what we also found is that even the School of Medicine was realizing that they collaborated across disciplines, both here at Penn and then beyond as well. So having a system that was dedicated just around a single domain wasn't even working for them. But we saw that FEDS was a great source of data. It had a lot of historical data in it and that we should use it. But that we needed something better. We needed something that could be used by the entire institution and that could really collect information that was purpose-driven, more around a holistic view of their activities and not just their publication patterns. So we've come up with this concept called Expertise at Penn, which is a marriage of the Symplectic Elements product and Penn Vivo. And our goals really here were to more directly engage with the faculty and the research apparatus of the university is to continue the long association that libraries have had with research activities at universities, but to find new ways of expressing that, not just by collecting literature and servicing that literature collection, but in fact, having more direct engagement with the faculty around understanding their impact and their contributions to their field, understanding how departments and schools were attracting faculty that could do that kind of work, and the impact of facilities and protocols as well. We wanted to improve the flow of data and information through the research process and really just begin showing those links between getting a research grant and doing a publication, producing the data set, and perhaps even teaching a seminar or a class. And to leverage a traditional expertise of librarians in knowledge management to support the goals of the university in teaching and research as well. So our approach, we just wanted to aggregate as much data as we could that was specific to the activity of researchers and faculty. We're trying to focus this in ways that are complementary to other systems. There are research administration systems out there. There are learning management systems out there. There are lab management systems. We're not trying to do all of that. We're really trying to focus on one piece that largely is an aggregation kind of function of pulling the appropriate data that reflects activity, scholarly activity, in some way, and pull it into a system that we can understand that data structure and leverage it. It's got two parts, an internal facing system. PennKey is the local authentication system here at Penn, where we can aggregate all this data before we go public with it, before we let anybody see it. We want the faculty to see it and understand this is data that reflects their activities and have them approve that. Additionally, it allows us to collect information that may not be bound to public use, but is useful in understanding in the context of faculty activities, some kind of business intelligence mining, you could imagine, those sort of things. And then it's got this external facing piece, which for the libraries is a gratis service of PenVivo, the Vivo instance that we have. But we also will push data out to any other approved source of public consumption. So university websites, school websites, departmental websites, even personal researcher pages, we would push data to as well. And a lot of it is about not just pushing out, oh, here are some little bits of information about this researcher or this group of researchers, but really trying to find links between the activities that they're doing, that they belong to editorial boards, that they have impact beyond just having written a paper, and that it is linked to other kinds of activities that they're doing, like running labs or mentoring new students into the field. We want to construct this data in ways that are purpose designed for use and reuse, and really it becomes sort of a data warehousing operation at that point, that you have this data, that you can describe it, that you understand its structure and its sources, and that it's authoritative in some way, and as a result can be relied on by consumers downstream. So we really see ourselves as pulling data from disparate sources, making sense of it, linking it, and then providing it out to a set of consumers that may be internal or external. So it's really to tell this more holistic picture of researcher and faculty activity. It's not, we're not trying to reduce them to an HMS value or anything like that, but really say that they have a very full and complex life, scholarly life, and that they contribute in a variety of ways. And expertise at Penn, I just want to put it in context as part of a larger suite of services the library is rolling out over the next couple of years, is this set of services, this suite of services that really try to address faculty needs for the research cycle, to really take advantage of the library as an organization has traditionally had relationships with every department on campus. We have liaison programs. It's not uncommon for research libraries, where we're there to really understand what's the curriculum of that department, what are the research expectations and agendas for those departments, and bring that back in as a university or a universal understanding of what the researchers are trying to do. And this is the initial set of services that we've targeted. This will expand over time, but BMP tool for data management planning, expertise at Penn for profile management, that's the internal facing system, PenVivo for publicizing that profile, but that could also be their departmental websites or even sites beyond Penn. And then Scholarly Commons, our publishing and repository platform. So it's in that context that we're really trying to approach the faculty and work with them in the schools in collecting this data. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Lauren to talk about particularly what we're doing with elements.
So with any service, one needs policies and processes. So as far as our expertise at Penn service, we're taking a toolkit approach. We're standardizing when possible, but we're also allowing for some sort of flexibility. For instance, importing data from a local homegrown system, of which there are many on campus. And as the size of the project and the number of people increased, we found that more formal project management processes were necessary. A more detailed schedule, improved collaboration and coordination between the different groups that are working on the project. And also improve the project velocity, which is pretty important when you don't have one person dedicated full time to rolling out a system. So moving forward with the other schools, we are implementing a project charter and a project plan. So the project charter at a high level identifies the scope, the business requirements, the stakeholders, and really cements the commitment between the libraries and the school to work together to implement the service. Afterwards, there is then the project plan, and that's more than nuts and bolts. It just further defines the scope, It defines the required resources, communication plans, and the procedures, and of course the basic schedule. And both the policy and our process, they need to adapt in response to new situations, new questions that come up, and of course, suggestions from the schools on how to improve implementation. And for all intents and purposes, the policy and the process are really the foundation for good client interactions, good customer support. All right, so the project is certainly a collaboration. We're sharing responsibilities between the schools and the libraries. You can see the toolkit approach in the communications bit. The libraries, for instance, were providing a template of boilerplate text about the service, and then we're leaving it up to the schools who know their faculty and researchers and admins best to directly communicate with their clientele using customized communications. So there's that tension between data privacy and wanting to foster a culture of openness, of collaboration. So that's something that we need to keep in mind when we are setting up systems that involve a large variety of data. Speaking of variety of data, Elements automatically pulls in high-quality publication info from sources like Crossref, library licensed resources like Web of Science and Scopus. And then we combine that with university and school data sources that are hopefully canonical. And as Mike mentioned earlier, we're trying to address the data quality issues as far upstream as possible. We don't want to create yet another system of data communicating. And data mapping, as we've learned, is certainly a team's work. There's many different skills that are required, and our partners at School of Medicine are fantastic as far as working with us mapping the data. And imports, so we are exporting the data from the Fed system, and we are then importing it into Elements. And at first blush, it seems rather straightforward. However, we're taking a relatively flat, siloed database, and we're taking that data, we're deduping it when we can, and then we're creating links and relationships between the researchers and their activities. And with Symplectic's help and a fairly large team of people, we do test imports for each module. So for instance, publications module, and then followed by the teaching activities module. We review each test import for accuracy before moving on to the next module. All right, so moving forward, we are working towards completing functional equivalent for PSOM to opt into. PSOM is the largest faculty at Penn with the pretty high number of publications that are put out every year. So we figured we'd start huge and kind of work our way down. So we'd also like to integrate with the Vice Provost for Research, their portal and workflow. And obviously become a university-wide system. They're also planning on investigating other platforms like Figshare and Orchid and Altmetric to enhance our research services suites. And we have learned the importance of understanding the current processes that are at a particular school and teasing out the underlying issues that those processes are trying to solve. And we really need to see the core or issues as a whole before we can properly implement and customize the system for each school's unique needs. Our processes are evolving through continual internal review. And the last step of our implementation plan is to get feedback from our clients. So we want to find out, what can we do better? How can the libraries and the schools partner in better ways to benefit faculty, researchers, and administration as individuals, and then also as the university as a whole? So I will let you ponder that. There's some time for questions, and then we've got a wrap-up slide to show you. Other questions?
What is your time frame between the beginning of this process and when do you anticipate to have it complete?
We are, for the School of Medicine in particular?
Sure.
Sure. Okay. All right. I would say probably by the end of the summer, we're hoping to have the opt-in system ready to go. From then, we are going to be working with the school dentistry, the dental school, to implement the system for them. This particular implementation with the School of Medicine has lasted longer than expected. There are several different reasons for that. One is everyone is learning the element system, so there's that learning curve. We are all working on other projects in addition to this implementation system, and also, one of the reasons why we have the policies in place now, and also some more formal project management processes, is to help control the scope. Now, as we started the implementation, as we've gone along, Elements itself has become much more robust. Its data model has gotten a lot more richer, I guess would be. So as that's expanded, our scope has expanded as well.
Within the library, which apps or software are you using to plan a project or collaborate between the librarians for a project of this scale, with deadlines and goals?
Well, we've started using Jira for the task management part. I find the calendaring system with Jira a little bit unwieldy as far as the amount of detail the schedule itself has to handle. So right now, I'm using a Google Excel spreadsheet or a Google spreadsheet. And this allows the School of Medicine different players in that arena, and also the libraries to see whose court the ball is in, and then also allows me to very quickly update the schedule if things fall behind or running ahead as well. Oh, and Basecamp. Symplectic provides us with a Basecamp instance.
A bullet point for people for the data management plan. Can you talk a little bit about that?
We talked a little bit about it. We put it up about a year ago and to make it available to faculty for doing data management planning, particularly for compliance. You can log in with your PIN key to it, and it will bring up local requirements. We've modified any of the requirements that are coming from funders, particularly federal funders, to reflect localization issues. They're not many. But what it does is help the faculty understand, oh, if this is an NIH grant, here are the requirements they have for data, and how to help, tips on how to write their data management plan, and then a place to deposit those so that we have them going forward. Particularly as compliance becomes a bigger issue, there's going to be more and more systems that need to grow up around the research process, and data management planning is one of the early ones that is out of the gate. They're being very gentle with researchers in their implementation, the federal government is, in that they are they suggested it, and then they began requiring it, and now they're beginning to really review your data management plans. And in fact, they're beginning to institute upfront reviews, midterm reviews, and at the end of the grant, whether you complied with what you said you were going to do with your data.
Sorry, Mike and Laura, can you describe how researchers are currently interacting with the system? And how have you ensured, I suppose, uptake and adoption by as many researchers as possible in the institution?
Sure, I'll repeat the question. You're asking how researchers and faculty are interacting with the element system and how uptake and adoption are going. So I'll let you answer that.
So right now we're in production with the Agency Cancer Center. They and your admin super user person are keeping their publications up to date, which is a fairly simple process because it does pull in publication data based on search settings that we've established. And then the researchers only have to click a button, yes, this is mine, or no, this is not mine. And then that publication is trained as yours. The ACC Center is using the citation data that accompanies all the publications to, I guess, report on how big is the grant?
It's a large center grant, a $50 million grant. It's a 5-year competitive renewal that they're up for, and they need to, for compliance purposes, report on research outputs. So this is fairly important to them, that they get it accurate, that it's comprehensive. And it's 350 researchers, so it's not a trivial activity to undertake. The other piece with our School of Medicine colleagues is they're mounting user tests right now because they're very sensitive to rolling this out to half of the standing faculty at the university, and they want to make sure that that's a good experience for their faculty. So with our cooperation, they're doing user testing around how ergonomic the system is, what issues faculty might have with the documentation and training that's available to them, that sort of stuff. So that's pending. That's going to happen in a month and a half or so, and then we'll know, we'll make adjustments and corrections from that experience. But we hope that ends up being, again, probably an organic thing that evolves over time as we have more experience with more faculty, but at least the beginning of how we hope to interact with the faculty in general is a little give and take, help us understand how to make this easier for you.
Thank you.
I have a question about the material types that are captured, because I was recently asked about books that are authored by our faculty. Does it capture book titles, or is it journal articles mainly?
It actually captures a wide variety of publications and also activities, professional activities and teaching activities. The books are definitely in there, and you can do Google Books. It queries Google Books for the metadata that's associated with the book itself, and then from there you can find your co-authors and that sort of thing. It also you can put in patents and a wide variety.
Yeah, presentations, poster sessions. You can really record a fairly large range of publications. I put air quotes around that. I don't know exactly what the range of that is, but anything that is sort of the traditional communication kind of vehicles, there are templates for how to address that. It does a lot of automatic harvesting, but you can also go in and put things in manually as well, and it will do some verification on that material also.
You can contact Kelsey. She'll be able to.
And I think maybe just one more question here. We will have a panel discussion later this afternoon. Is there a final question for Laura and Mike? Thank you.
Has it been fun? Yes.
Great, thank you. So I think the Penn Elements project is really very robust and of large scale. And so I like to say, they should have badges that say YOLO because they did start big and are scaling back, but wonderful, thank you. So next, and we're going to have one more presentation and then we will have a short break. And so I'm going to introduce John Gieschen, who is the head of client services for Symplectic. And he's really going to talk about when you are looking at all of these technologies, and I talked about how there's more data available to institutions and researchers today than ever before. Tom, I'll let you find your presentation. And the need for really having clean data and working with data. And so that's what John is going to focus on. It's probably on the desktop. There you go.
All right. Well, good morning. I'm very, very aware that I'm between you and the coffee. And I'll either be as quick or at least as interesting as possible to get us through this last bit. As Kelsey mentioned, I'm involved with professional services. I've done this my whole career in a variety of different industries, and really I've always looked at how technologies can be used in a variety of ways, banking, insurance, etc. The last 10, 15 years has been in the service of research and research administration. And it really has been fascinating to see how technology has come into the research space and kind of the pacing of that. One of the first jobs I had was producing multimedia content. This is back when CD-ROMs were invented, right? First time you could put video on a disc and you could see it on a computer and how incredible that was. And the way you could do it was to have a hardware card in your computer that could read it. We would sell these training programs that had video. One way you could do it was to sell the entire computer with the card in a gigantic gray case with the CDs, and then we would ship them places and they would break because they would jostle so much. So we'd eventually just drive them places. And the company I worked for had plants all over the US. So we'd literally drive to Ohio, drive to California, drive wherever we needed to try and establish multimedia as a thing. As Timo mentioned earlier, now you think of your phone. You know, and that was only 20 years ago or so. So it's really remarkable. What's been interesting to me when I got involved with Symplectic was really looking at, in part, the public profiles of faculty and researchers, and where that sits right now. And I graduated from SUNY Plattsburgh, State University of New York at Plattsburgh, a small liberal arts and earth science college up north of the Adirondacks on Lake Champlain. And I thought I would take a look and see what they're doing for faculties. And this all made sense. I went to academics, we are faculty, that seemed logical. When I clicked on We Are Faculty, I came to this page, and this didn't seem logical to me. There was a list of faculty profiles down on the left. I picked one of my old professors, Dr. Morrissey, and when I clicked on his name, I thought, well, maybe this will be his profile, surely, because it was faculty profile. And it wasn't. It was an article that he had written, and I thought, well, that's very confusing. And so I did a little digging, and it turned out at SUNY Plattsburgh, they've got two different URLs that both suggest faculty profile. About Plattsburgh Profiles faculty is articles and literally miscellaneous content. There's really no rhyme, no reason to what goes there. And then within the actual academics, English faculty, then you come again to kind of what we would consider a traditional profile. I thought how interesting this is, that not only is the profile itself for Dr. Morrissey clearly hand-coded HTML, but he's actually got two profiles, and one isn't even actually a profile, it's an article. And so this is kind of where we are, the faculty profiles, researcher profiles out there in the public. So you can't talk about profiles without talking about data, and obviously we're going to talk a lot about data today. And I wanted to start there and kind of work our way out to the actual profile. And Mike and Lauren did a great job of getting into some of the real details of how that data gets into a system, gets pushed out and populated. I'm going to talk at a little bit of a higher level. When you think about data, and when institutions are thinking about my faculty profile data, right, these are just buzzwords, keywords, if you will, about data, right? Structured, unstructured, blank. What are half of these things, right? They overlap, they crisscross, some of them mean nothing, some of them mean a number of things, and everyone's trying to wrestle what is all the data? And while we're wrestling with what it is and how it can be interconnected, presented, we're constantly generating more. As we put up faculty profiles, of course, what we're trying to do is distill, as Mike, I think, rightly said, creating that contextual identity of a researcher. All of this data is like a shotgun. So how do you deal with it? And I think that's a question that we're all really wrestling with. Coupled with the volume of data that's being collected, now there's the pressure to open the data and open access to the data. So now we're creating data in a way that we can't really imagine. We're linking it and unlinking it, tagging it, structuring it, doing all these things to it. And while we're wrestling with that, now all of a sudden we're pressured to make it all available and let other people get access to it. So if the problem wasn't as complex as it was in the first instance, we just had a lot of it, now there's a push and requirement and even penalties to not make it available and not to make it openly linked to other places. So this is a fairly terrifying place to be. I want to just let Dr. Morrissey have an impressive faculty profile that represents him in his contributions to the university of the past 25, 30 years. He's got a ton of data out there. I need to find a way to make it all available, and yet, if we go back to the original example, they've got these two little URLs there doing nothing. So we're very far from actually creating that identity. This was from an article by one of our digital science colleagues, Phil Jones, about open data and being at the tipping point for open data. It was on Scholarly Kitchen, and I'm sure it's hard to see the URL citation, but if you Google just open data tipping point, it's a really fascinating article. But in a nutshell, what Phil's argument was, or his position was this need for open data is perhaps at the tipping point of no longer a consideration, but actually a reality. So if we're at that point where data has to be open, and I'm going to attach that data to the researcher who's involved with generating that data at some level, how am I going to create that identity, that public identity that will connect to that data? And if this ship has sailed, then it's clearly something that needs to get rectified rather quickly. As I was thinking about this presentation, I was reading about the Google I/O conference that they had a couple days ago. And what struck me was the part that I bolded there from one of the reviews of the conference. And this really gets to how we're processing all the data. And this really gets to semantic web, linked open data. But this idea of machine learning, of the data being structured in such a way that we're allowing machines to make inferences without direct input. We all recognize this on our smartphones. When I got into Philly last night and I checked my phone, I was getting all these news stories about Philadelphia, so my location thing was on. Right? I didn't do anything, it was just there. Right? It's kind of the most simple kind of real world example of that. Machine learning is going to connect to all of this data, and again, with this open data, I think you can kind of see the thrust of where I'm going, right? There's a lot of data being generated, there's a lot of data being interconnected, and now the machines are able to connect to that data and do things with it that you may or may not intend. So again, having that identity to be the holder of that data is really key. So let's talk about profiles in the context of all of the data. So as I've been mentioning, every institution, every entity wants to be able to have their faculty or their researchers up front with a way to recognize their contributions and a way to recognize the work that they've done. But with the data growing around them, it's hard to find that anchor. The data will end up somewhere. It'll end up everywhere. You can Google any of your faculty, any of your researchers, and you'll see their name come up in a number of places. You can do it for yourself. It'll come up in LinkedIn, Facebook, whatever it is. For years, I showed up on a Bob Dylan listserv argument I had back in 1983 that finally, thankfully, went away. But it will be out there, and once it's out there, there's no controlling it. So really, as Mike and Lauren are trying to land the project they're doing, there's also a real urgency around it. right? Because if you don't have that public profile and you're not in control of the data that's populating the profiles, it'll show up other places, and of course we don't. So I've mentioned it a couple of times, I think the key to profiles is really establishing the identity. There's a lot of this important other attributes of the profile, and these aren't to be minimized, of course. Once you have a profile, it's important to increase visibility of your research outputs. I mean, all these things are not to be trivialized in any way. They're kind of maybe the platform of why you must have a profile that's out there. But I think at a higher level, what's more critical is establishing the identity of the faculty or the researcher online. Because as I said, they're going to be established by somebody. So it needs to be the institution themselves that are creating that faculty or that researcher profile, establishing that data. Just a quick graph slide. This is the comparison of research networking tools. This is about 40 times a day a Wikipedia article on systems around research networking and profiling. So this is over just the last 60 days. So basically every day there's at least 40 people accessing this Wikipedia site about research profile and networking tools. So there's a lot of activity around it. Everyone's trying to solve it. And I don't know if there's actually a really strong answer yet, but let's talk a little bit about a few options that are out there. Really what you see is handwritten HTML, and then this is back, when I really had all the web stuff when JavaScript was invented, and you can take a scripting language and pull data and put it on a web page. And, oh my God, that was amazing. It was a miracle. And now obviously you can do that with so much more. There's pushing data websites, and now of course the aggregation. Aggregating sites that are aggregating websites that are creating third-level aggregation sites. It's insane. The web's eating itself. And all of these things currently exist today. As I talk to a lot of institutions about profile sites and about their research management, research information management systems, I'd say probably at least half the people I talk to are managing profile sites by handwritten HTML. Hundreds and hundreds of pages of handwritten HTML. When a publication comes out, someone adds it inline HTML in 2015. It's mind-boggling. There's a lot of effort that goes into managing these things. And it's a fairly brute force kind of undertaking. So, and this will be the last slide, and I'd like to ask a couple of questions actually to the group before we get to the coffee, but two of the open source systems that I've been spending some time with over the past 6 months or so, Vivo and the Profiles RNS out of the Harvard Dallas team. Show of hands, anybody involved with Vivo currently? How about Profiles RNS? So Profiles RNS, for those who don't know, is really fundamentally it's kind of quick win is you can connect it to PubMed and it'll suck down PubMed data and populate your profiles. That's the bare kind of minimum value. After that, Profiles does some really neat things. These are both open source systems. Profiles does some really neat things about then creating networks amongst researchers based on the publication data that was pulled in and then matching on keywords, co-authors, collaborators, a variety of things, and then creates these really interesting researcher networks. And you can Google Profiles RNS and you'll come to the Harvard site. We'll talk more about it. Profiles RNS was created by Dr. Griffin Weber at Harvard as part of their initiative. Vivo is similar in concept, where Vivo is a semantic web application, which could either make you irate because of that term, or not know what it means, or just your eyes glaze over. But essentially, the idea is it's linked to data, and that's a whole longer conversation. But the idea behind Vivo is that once you put your data in Vivo, it can then be identified and linked amongst other Vivo sites. And then it also has this bit of networking capacity. What's really interesting about Vivo and Profiles are they both have vibrant communities. So in terms of creating these faculty profiles, there's a lot of support there throughout the communities. The Symplectic also provides services around it, but I think what's more interesting is Both of these systems are only but a few years old, but their communities are growing quickly to expand them and to deepen the functionality that's there. So in terms of, as we kind of looked at, the proliferation of data and the pressure to get the data open and available to good avenues, I put ORCID there because ORCID, people sometimes think of as a profile system. ORCID's not a profile system. ORCID has profiles almost inadvertently. And ORCID is an identifier for a researcher, which all of their publication information can be affiliated with. And so kind of a happenstance of that is that feels like a profile, but it's actually not. And there's a lot of discussion about that. But ORCID's a really powerful tool with these kind of systems to establish a persistent identifier for a researcher. So I just wanted to ask the group, does anybody have or would be willing to share how they're handling researcher profile or faculty profiles at their institutions? How they do it, how they maintain it, how they keep it up to date? Yeah.
So it's interesting because as both of these talks have only looked at the open source systems, we're using or beginning to work in a couple years now with a Thomson Reuters product. Commercial as it is, but it has many of the features and it's already been advanced. So they're in the process of going through the platform of research and Barrett's, which is developed in Europe and has different drivers from the culture and the internet, the national push, I think, that's coming to the US. So we have been working for some time now trying to get our faculty to, and from the library supporting the service of that, to enter their data, having some, as the previous one was automatic kind of searching and getting it. So there's technology-driven support to make it easier. And I think one of the biggest challenges, though, is to position the value of this kind of approach, having profiles, not just for the individual faculty, which is harder, I think. Sometimes it's not seen as worth the effort. I think with the biosketches and all that's coming down, they're starting to say. But more interestingly, and we're sort of hitting a different point, the institution finding value. And so it's not just about the faculty identity, but it's about the institutional identity that's defined by all the pieces of the faculty. So we're right now on a population approaching 2,000 faculty, but we have about 400. But it took a lot to get that. So we're trying now this whole question, do we require it or not?
That's great. Thank you. And what institution are you in?
Gieschen.
Oh, great, yeah. Thanks. And actually, I was talking to some colleagues about some of the other commercial products that do that. Full disclosure, I just don't know about them, so I can speak about it, but thank you for that. But you're exactly right. When I have discussions, when people contact me about maybe doing a profiles RNS implementation, what they always say is, well, I want to have departmental profiles for faculty. Which is fine, right? And you can see where faculty are like, that's lovely, but whatever. But when you look at a system of profiles and the networking that system does, the value that comes from the original profile, it's gigantic. But you're right, having a conversation at the faculty level to understand the value proposition is very difficult. And I think even institutions are not really seeing kind of what we were talking about earlier, that the data is going to be made available. It will be on the web. It will be open and it will be there. Whether you've got a container as an institution to put that data in context, that's really the question. Any other, yeah.
So I'm Ann Seymour. I actually was here at Penn and leading the Vivo and Symplectic team, and now I'm at Hopkins, and I thought Penn was a distributed place. Hopkins is a few Hopkins colleagues here. And there's actually no one system. There's, I would say, maybe a dozen systems. And, but, so I'm in the, on the health sciences side in our School of Medicine, along with School of Public Health as SciVal experts. But we are looking, we have a pretty high level team that was charged by the provost, I think, to make some recommendations for how to move forward. And we've looked at whole host of different systems, and it's challenging because there really is no one answer. And I think what our approach is trying to figure out how to make recommendations that still allow individual schools and units to maybe use their current systems until they eventually see the light and want to move to some more cross-institution.
So some institutions that I've talked to think about doing, this is all just kind of theoretical stuff, but using a Vivo tool as a kind of a top node, and then using whatever you want on the bottom, whether it's a Thompson or whatever. But since Vivo it's open source and it's got an open ontology and all that, having that kind of be the hub and have other people do their own thing. It's not that loud. Because really, trying to hammer anybody with, everyone's going to use this is it's just not going to happen. But thank you. Somebody else was willing to volunteer? Yeah.
We have had for 5 or 6 years ePress's Digital Commons, and just started to use their selected work tool to create faculty pages. And that's all taking place out of the library with not a great deal of faculty participation currently, but in a timely sort of miracle, we're also doing like a website rebuild for the institution. We're trying to get in that conversation.
Yeah, and it's difficult, right? I think everybody's going through this. It's a really difficult thing. I was talking to somebody earlier before the session started. Before I got involved in the research space, I was involved in some general e-commerce stuff. E-commerce was the first. Remember, I was like, oh, no one will put their credit card online. It's crazy. This will never work. Of course, obviously, it does now. But now you can, if you want to make an e-commerce shop to sell anything, you can use a template and create it, and boom. You can have very complex e-commerce stuff. These little template shells exist all over the place. We do that. But something like research faculty profiles, is still a very tough nut that hasn't been cracked yet. And yet conceptually, it's so simple, right? It's kind of the most basic web page. Here's a person, here's stuff about them. The level of complexity to get that simple thing created it's really interesting why that is so complicated. So. Okay. Well, I don't want to sandwich you the coffee because I've done some too. Thank you very much.
So, we are going to take a break, but we'd like to definitely be back in this room if we could by 11:20. So it's a little bit of a short break. I apologize for that, but to get back on schedule, maybe everybody could do that quickly. Have your coffee, your bio break, and then come back in. So I promise you we're going to have lunch. So that's the carrot at the end, is the lunch.
Let's see how sure. It's really, you just play around. It's free. I think there's some limit. Just check out the videos and stuff. I thought it was weird. I tried to get it set. Almost like a radio base.
Go ahead and get started with our next speaker. We have some folks trickling in. I appreciate that everyone did try to adhere to the short break as much as possible. There was a line in the ladies' room, so apologize about that. Someone else familiar with the building might be able to redirect us next time. Okay, so our next speaker is Tim Albee from Overleaf, and he's going to talk about cloud-based scientific writing tools, and I will go ahead and turn it over to Tim. So here we go.
Thank you. Hello everyone. So my name is Tim, and I work for Overleaf. Overleaf is a tool for collaborative writing, reviewing, and publishing science into the cloud. So you may have noticed already in French, so bear with me in my accent. Hopefully it's going to be alright. If you don't understand a thing, just going to talk to me in the work. So today I'm going to talk about science. I'm going to talk about collaborative science into the cloud and in the internet age. So this is a map of the collaborative science in the last few years. And as you can see, the science is big, science collaboration is big. I have a shiny graph, but Timo already talked about it, so I'm not going to go through the numbers. It says the same stories, collaboration is big. And collaboration is not only huge in the world today, but it's also good. It's good for you all, it's good for the author, and it's good for the institutions. And this report from the Royal Society shows that there is a strong collaboration, strong correlation between the number of citations per article and the number of international authors for the same article. And citation is just one metric, one simple metric, but it does show, if not the quality of the paper, the recognition papers. And so collaboration is happening worldwide, of course. It's also happening in the US. As you can see in this report from the National Science Foundation, more than 30% of the paper written in US institutions are written by multiple authors from different institutions. And that number is already twice as much as it was 20 years ago. So, the problem with collaboration is that it all are done by email mostly, and email is broken. I mean, email is great, it's a super tool, but the problem with email is that it was not designed for collaboration. It was designed for many things, but not for collaboration, and so it doesn't work for collaboration. I guess we were all in there, the final doc. You send a document across via email, you rename it, you review it, then you comment on the things that are out of date, then you change something, it was already changed, and at the end of the day, it's just being a big mess. And you wasted a lot of time. Basically, the entire life cycle of the document looks like that. It's a lot of back and forth between the author, then a lot of back and forth between the audio, and then whenever the publisher is involved, it's for a bit more back and forth. You just wasting so much time. I'm not going to talk about getting the paper to readers. There is so many other problems. Don't get me started on formatting and typesetting, maintaining references, and revision cycles. There is many problems with collaboration today. And that's the situation John Winkler and John Hannay were facing. It was a bit more than 3 years ago, and they were building borderless cards for Heathrow terminals in London. So if you flew to London, you may have experienced those. That's quite a cool thing, especially with what Google is building right now. That does exist already in Heathrow terminals. And that's thanks to John and John. But they were working collaboratively with a few other dozen scientists, and it just didn't work. So John and Gala tried to look for a better tool on the internet, like we were doing this kind of situation. And when he couldn't find one, he just decided to build it, like we don't call it this kind of situations. So he built a tool, we called it Winkler, and decided to share it with his colleagues. And his colleagues liked it, so they shared it with their other colleagues, their friends, who shared it with their friends, and so on and so on. Winkler took off, It's now called Overleaf, which is a bit easier to pronounce, and it's big. In 2 years, we saw more than 2 million documents created by 200,000 authors coming from more than 2,000 institutions. That's 2 years, and the numbers are slightly out of date and are more bigger. So Overleaf looks like that. That's the root of the process of Overleaf. There is one document in one place. There is multiple versions of the document, but there is only one current version of the document that lives in one place. This place, the cloud, allows for powerful collaboration between everyone, between authors, between reviewers, between publishers, and then at the end, the document is available for readers. So, let me tell you a quick story about 3 persons. So that's Arthur from my university in Canada, and together with Jacob, which is working in Florida, and David, which is from Oxford University in the UK, they decided to get together to write a paper. They could have done the always sending emails back and forth, but they wanted to do something quickly and something in real time. So they got to use Overleaf. And thanks to Overleaf, they were able to lose the author of all the other aspects and writing. And so they were able to focus on one thing, and one thing only, writing. The 3 of them wrote the first draft of their paper in 4 days, which is quite impressive. So let's have a look at Overleaf itself. Overleaf is a simple but powerful interface. You have mostly 2 panels. On the left, you can see an editor, which is a word-like editor, while the author can write this paper. And on the right, you have the output. So the output is a real-time preview of the documents. And the good thing is that this is the end of the document. I mean, like, when you're going to want to get your documents, you're going to just download the PDF. It's going to look just like it does on the right-hand side, and that's it. You don't have to worry about how it's going to look like. We want to match the Word document to PDF. We know that doesn't work. So this is good, because you have the end version of the document always. You can always look at it. So Overleaf works with LaTeX under the hood. LaTeX is a typesetting language that's really familiar for the scientists, especially in mathematics and physics. And so for those who know that LaTeX, they can just edit the source of the file simply by clicking the button. The document of Overleaf is not just one file, it's a group of files. So you can have the content that you divide in multiple files for simplicity, and you can also add figures, bibliography, and so on, other assets that are linked to the document. So the document is not just one file, it's a group of files that you can be able to share later on. I mentioned Overleaf is a powerful tool. We got this tweet a couple of weeks ago. So it's not a 1,000 author, Timo mentioned earlier, but we were 62. I think that's great. And I think that's thanks to Overleaf they were able to collaborate all together on the same paper and get everyone using to shine. So Overleaf provides also tools for reviewers. For example, the basic inline commenting and track change right into the box for reviewer. At Overleaf, we really like to make author life way easier. And we'd like to do that on every aspect we can of it. So we built an integration with reference managers like Symplectic, Zotero, and Hannay. There is more to come. And thanks to that, in a couple of clicks, even one click, an author can link his bibliography from some other place to right into Overleaf, and then reference any citations. So we linked with references manager, but that's not just it. We also linked a lot with submission journals and repositories. So right from the paper, you see it in the back. You can access to the publishing view, where there is a huge list of publishers. I can't list them all just today, but come and have a look, and we are in new verify. And just talk about 2 of them. I'm starting with fiction, so Mark's going to talk to you about fiction later on today. So I won't say much more about it, but just know that with Overleaf you can publish your paper on Figshare in just 2 clicks. The previous one was iPhone 7 research, which is a peer-reviewed journal. iPhone 7 research, we build with them a deep integration. So with simplicity in mind, an author can send his first draft of the paper to iPhone 7 research team, the editorial team, and they're going to get just one email, but a notification email. And they're going to be able to come back to Overleaf and make comments on things that doesn't work, things that doesn't follow the publishing guidelines, and the author will then be able to implement those changes. And so with no email back and forth, but just everyone on the same platform in real time, they're going to be able to implement changes and get to a final draft. Finally, on the submission links, we build custom submission links so that anybody can easily set up submission links for people without deep integration. We often do that as a first step for the users to test how they like integrations. We do automatic pre-submission checks, and we also guide the user to for the few steps he has to go to publish this paper on journal or So, Overleaf is a tool for scientists, and as you can imagine, many scientists are coming from institutions, and especially universities. So we realized that since the very beginning, and we knew we had to do something to link them both on the same platform. We have a number of partnerships with universities, mostly in the US and in the UK, and one of them is with Stanford. With Stanford, we were able to provide the full features of Overleaf to all authors, whether they're students, faculty member, or staff. The cool thing about that is that to give them access to the full feature of Overleaf, we asked people to join the group on Overleaf, which we call Timo. And once they joined the group, we were able to get a lot of data. And the data, we then show it to Stanford as showing new graphs, as you can see. And we can provide answers from very, very nice, interesting questions. Who are the author? What are they doing? What are they working on? And with whom? How much do they write? How much do they publish? How much do they review? That's just a few of the questions you can get answers from, as you can see. We also build specific tools, like assignment tools. So a professor can easily create an assignment, send it to the student, and create solutions. So another partnership we built was with Ron, and I think that's a nice testimonial. With Ron, we also set up submission links, so the students were just a couple of clicks away to submit their paper to Ron's online registry. One last feature I'm going to talk about today is the model editor. So we didn't build that feature especially with Institution 9, but it actually works great. We help users to feel right at home when they enjoy the full feature of Overleaf. As you can maybe see at the top, we also can change the menu buttons so they're not 2 clicks away, but just 1 click away from the screen. So that's a few indicative numbers for you. I say indicative because that's only the user we know about, and we estimate those numbers to be 2 to 4 times higher. You can see a few universities in the US, University of Winkler is close to 500 users now. If your university is not on that list, just please come and see me later on today. I'll share this number with you, and I'll put the numbers to share with you. Okay, so let me just summarize quickly what I've talked about today. Overleaf is big and Overleaf is growing faster. It's growing fast. We're close to 250,000 users now. And in addition to provide great features for authors, we decided to create partnership with academic publishers to add value for authors, reviewers, and publishers. As many of our users come from institutions and universities, it makes sense for us to build something. So we like to provide full benefits for the end user and other tools like assignment tool. And then in exchange for metrics to the universities, analytics, and deep integration. That's it for me. If you have any questions, please just let me know, and I'll be around the day.
Tim, I have a quick question. So LabTech is traditionally associated with mathematicians, physicists, bioinformaticians.
Yes.
How wide is the use of this particular cloud-based LabTech application by researchers? So what is the spread of the use across disciplines?
So most of our users are physicists and mathematicians. We have more and more users from life sciences because they use more and more data. But as you saw earlier, we built one thing on top of LaTeX to hide the LaTeX from the normal user. And so now, as it wasn't possible a year ago, now people who don't know anything about LaTeX can still come on our different papers while LaTeX is still available
for institutions. What kind of can you run any reports and something on the things that people are working on projects? And if you do, what are the implications for perhaps privacy or something?
Yes, obviously privacy is a concern.
For institutions.
We're trying to see what we can build according to what the user agreed to share. So we never look at the full paper, but we look at metadata on the paper, and then we can share the data.
This is a little bit of a base level technical question.
Good.
I've never quite understood how you can have multiple, what happens if you have multiple simultaneous users editing?
So
how does that all get?
I guess you use the Google Doc. Do you know Google Doc? So on Google Documents, you can see cursors of all users, and as it's full real time, it's like if you have two keyboards on the same computer. So we have a whole technical thing. I could talk to you about it for hours, but we take edits from user and then we merge them on our server and then push back those edits to all users on this current paper. As it works in real time, it works quite well.
Quick question, sorry if I missed it. How is it that you do versioning? So in Google Docs, versioning is sort of automatic, but what is sort of missing in Google Docs is a way, at least I'm not aware of, a way to sort of put a tag on a particular version so that, for instance, you can send that to your reviewers while you can continue to make revisions, in the document.
Yeah. So we have two kinds of history within our list. So we have this Google Doc-like history, which is like every time you do edits, we start it, and then we can show you what was the last year, so you can remove some and show some history. And that's what we call save version, and you can exactly as you just ask. Save version, put the label in it, and it shares this version, or let's go back later, compare between versions, and see what's changed.
Sub-versions?
So we call that saved versions.
Saved versions.
Right. And this is saved version, and then we have the history, more classical.
It's sort of connected. What I would ask.
Yeah, I think maybe another answer to your question is that the updates are very quick. They're not absolute real time. They're very quick, and you can see where the authors are in the document. So you sort of stay away from one another. And typically you would anyway. I mean, you wouldn't write on exactly the same text. Although it is possible that if you highlight all the text where a person is writing and you hit delete, there can be a conflict, but not likely.
Yeah, you're going to see some things that don't make sense, but you can, as it's short time, you can read easily.
I think we have time for one final question. There is one. Yes.
This is sort of privacy-related question too. Just we have a good amount of research narratives you can do
not bad in China, so that's good news. So I haven't talked about it, but we also provide a private cloud, so we can take our whole application, it's works well, and just put that somewhere else, where user from a particular university or country can access it easily. And we won't have the same access to it, so it's going to be more.
Thanks, Tim. Thank you.
Cheers.
Our next speaker is Hannay, who is the founder of Altmetric, and he is going to talk about, as its name would imply, some alternative metrics that can work alongside other traditional metrics that are out in the research world. So with that, let's get his presentation up. I've said it 1,000 times, I don't know why I didn't touch the mouse. Okay, here we go.
Hi, everyone. So, like Elsa said, my name is Ewan, and I'm from Altmetric. Altmetric.com has become an important distinction besides time. It's always a bit difficult for me to know where to pitch these kind of talks, because I'm not sure how familiar people are with Altmetric. It's still quite a new field. So I'm doing a obligatory, you raise your hand, because you've got a good feeling of what Altmetric is. Okay, actually that's pretty good. I always, so what normally happens is 50% of the room put their hand up, 50% don't, which means can't do anything with it. So there are actually more people familiar with it. So what I might do is I'll skip over a little bit more of the kind of basic stuff. You can always find me afterwards. I'm around all day. So, in this talk, what I want to do quite quickly is talk about what are all metrics, why do people talk about them, why do all metrics exist in the first place, what's the problem that they're supposed to be solving. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about how institutions are using them, more specifically how different groups within institutions use them. Because one of the first things you find out about all metrics is everyone has a slightly different definition. The reason that everyone has a slightly different definition is because different groups want different things from them. But before we get into that, let's kind of back up a bit. So, in my opinion, you may disagree, so we can modify it a little bit. You may show stuff to have. I think ideally the articles you produce, the research that's coming out of your institution has three things going. First of all, it has to be of good quality. That's kind of paramount. That's the basis that all of this stuff is built on. And by quality, it's a bit of an angry word, but we mean it's rigorous. You can replicate it. Ideally, it's significant in some way or original. It doesn't have to be. Maybe it's a technical advance. It's not something that sets the world alight. It does increment the field a little bit. And the second bit on top of that is it has to get attention. People have to read it. That's the point of publishing journals in theory. They help disseminate as well as this kind of thing. And really want the right people to see it as well. It's not just to put it up on the website where anyone can access it. You need it to get to a particular audience, be that other scholars or, as we'll see later on, people might take it to put it in practice and things. And then finally, ideally, you want that work to affect change, right? To actually make a difference. Ideally, you don't just write work, people see it and go, well, that's fine. Move on to the next thing really quickly. The best possible outcome for you if you've written a paper is to actually change the way people are doing something in the real world. And impact means a lot of different things to different people. Unfortunately, I don't have a lot of hard definitions in this talk. But impact could be a social impact, it could be an economic one. You can be patenting something or starting a startup company or something from some research you've done. It could be cultural benefit, it doesn't necessarily need to be kind of hard cash. Or importantly, it could be something that influences practice. So you can imagine, for example, papers that influence the way doctors treat patients in an emergency, or the nurses treat patients, that kind of clinical practice. So I've got three brief tangents here to talk about, kindly labeled them. And every time there's a tangent on the screen, you can drift off for 20 seconds. It's not core to the talk if you want. So tangent number one is, really, like I said, articles. Really, you shouldn't say articles. It's outputs now. I'm not going to talk about that. You've heard about it a bit before. I'm sure Mark's going to talk about it as well. It is something important to bear in mind. That nowadays, it's not just articles that are kind of considered or can be considered primary research articles. Software, there's data sets, this kind of thing. And increasingly, I think we see more of them be the end result of some research, rather than just a stop and post before you have to kind of write the 4-page report around it to get any credit for it. And funding guidelines and mandates increasingly reflect both of these things, right? First, the quality, certainly the quality and the impact stuff, and then secondly, the different types of impact. So, I mean, this won't be news to you guys, so the small things, you know, there's no like huge, big step change, it's much more incremental changes over time, but for example, if you're going to set biostates, you can start with data sets and software. That doesn't seem like a big thing, but it's timed with changes like, you know, in some journals, and again, I'm like, Mark talked about this, up until fairly recently, you couldn't cite a data set, or you weren't allowed to put it in the references section. Certainly when I was writing software for informatics, if you used a piece of software, you weren't supposed to cite it, you weren't put it in the acknowledgement section. And on the impact front, again, worldwide, so it varies from country to country, certainly in the UK, where we have this national research assessment exercise called the REC last year. Some of the results of that have come out. There's an impact component to that. In Holland, they have an equivalent kind of exercise coming up. Again, there's an impact component. In Australia, they've been doing piloting various things. Here in the US, again, I think there's NSF here. It's a little bit further behind in terms of an impact agenda, if you like. But still, you are asked, you know, when a grant is reviewed, the intellectual merit, but also the broader impacts of that work. So slowly, all these things are coming through, you know, from the top down as well. And the problem with all this, if you like, is that the tools that we have to measure impact, attention, and quality, or at least the tools that we try and measure those things with, are things like traditional citations, and the various kind of aggregated views of that, like the H index, or the journal impact factor, this kind of thing. And so there's two issues with that. And the first is that really what traditional citations are reflecting is scholarly attention, right? Citations don't tell you anything about the quality of the work. You could say maybe they're correlated. But pieces of work that are considered bad for scientific work, this is a piece of work that are considered good. And indeed, that's one of the problems with something like impact factor, when you're rolling it up and looking back at level. It also doesn't tell you much about the impact outside of the scholarly space. You know, if we think back to the ER doctor or the nurse, or the kind of people who are having a cultural impact on, those people aren't writing papers that then go into a citation index and get counted in a number quite easily. So we kind of got a gap between what funders and ideally what everyone should be looking for, which is this quality and attention, and what we can deal with traditional tools. And that gap is, well, I think it's got quite a nice name, given by this chap who's called Paul Walters, at CWTS in London. Is a big bibliometrics research group, partner, I think, that has a big bibliometrics research group. And he calls it, and he and his colleagues call it the evaluation gap. So what do we do about this evaluation gap where, as a researcher or as an institution, we're asked to provide evidence for these things or these indicators for these things, and you don't have the tools to measure it, or we can then fill that gap. And that's partly where Allmetrics comes in. So I talked about being from allmetric.com. Allmetric.com is the company that I work for. The field in general is called Allmetrics. And even though people have been doing Allmetrics like things for quite a long time, really it kind of capitalized with the Allmetrics manifesto in 2010. So this was written by a bunch of smart people, including Jason Green, who was a PhD student at Chapel Hill at the time. Cameron Nealon, who is mostly public library science, and a couple of other people. And it basically sets out a manifesto for what we can do with, like if we take advantage of the fact that research, the way people produce research, read research, use research is increasingly online. And the possibility, you know, can we take the exhaust from all this data and do something cool with it? And actually it talks a little bit, the kind of, what I should say is that they talked a little bit less about impact and more about discovery, because at the time that's what they thought the big use case for the state would be, like helping you find new papers to read. It's still online, you can go to collaborators.org and view it. And out of that manifesto came kind of blossoming, a lot of academic projects looking at this, but also commercial ones. So collaborators.com, again, is one of those commercial companies. There's a couple of others I mentioned there, absolutely awesome. And what we do in simple form is we try and look beyond just articles, first of all, and then scholarly citations. So we're looking at those software data sets. We're also looking at citations for other things as well, to help people get credit for credit. That's the ultimate goal of what we're trying to do, why we're trying to get this impact. Is there any questions so far? So this bit, I'll skip over a little bit because I think you might be familiar with it, but this, what are all metrics? The point is, we talked again about citation data, what can we do to complement that? So we're not saying citations suck, they're no good. Close them out the window and start again with, replacing them with tweets or something. What we're saying is that in addition to citations, there's all sorts of other data sources you can take. We can combine the two and to get a more holistic view. And there's a lot of that data online. I mean, this again is what the whole metrics.org manifesto was about. But we at almetric.com, we track attention across all papers, or as many papers as we can find anyway. And we see about 50,000 articles a week. We've been going since 2011, the end of 2011, and there's about 4 million articles now in the database that we mentioned at least once. Not just bookmarked, but someone has actually said something about it, even if it's just sharing a link. So it's not an insignificant number of papers, right? It's by no means all of them, but it's a decent chunk of papers that we are discussed or used or mentioned in some form that we can track. And the kind of things we see, or some you see, or that you might have heard of before, being things like blogs, reviews on sites like Faculty 1000 or PubMed comments increasingly now, pub ones. In other fields like maths, there's math overflow and question and answer sites, things like that. Newspapers and magazines, so both international titles, and we talk about your work being talked about in the New York Times or Washington Post, but also specialist titles as well, professional magazines, so Chemistry World or Physics Today, this kind of thing. And also, actually, amateur science magazines. Also, the other interesting place where science can kind of reach the public quite directly. You've got Scientific American or Public Mechanics, this kind of stuff. And then finally, social media. So that's Twitter and Facebook and Google+. So the reason I don't highlight that so much is because I think it's what jumps to people's minds straight away when we talk about metrics. Which is a good thing and a bad thing. It's a good thing because it is actually a useful source, and there's a lot of it as well. It's a very high volume source. But it's not necessarily the most important. So moving on another quick tangent, promise it's a quick one, which is about the newspapers and magazines. I mentioned it's all sorts of different newspapers and magazines. And the reason for that is because we serve two audiences, if you like, at Almetric. I talked about how what we're doing is to help you get credit for what you're doing, right? And so we end up dealing a lot with individual authors of papers, as well as research administrators and people in large success papers. And when you are a research administrator, the kind of impact or attention that you'd like to hear about from a research administrator is this kind of very high level attention, stuff like it was talked about in Time, or it was in the Washington Post, or there was a New York Times spread of this kind of thing. That's kind of big headline attention. But if you're an author, every single research effort you have is your baby, right? You really care about everything that people are saying about it. And you don't care if it's in the Washington Post or even it's your donkey talk. You want that data collected and you're going to get credit for it somehow. So we do have this bit of balance, trying to determine what is useful to collect and what we can safely. Moving on a little bit to more of the impact side, that was really attention, what we saw before, are things like policy documents. So if you think about guidelines that the World Health Organization produces in medicine, or didn't have the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. Here in the US, like the Environmental Protection Agency, there's all sorts of government and non-governmental organizations, bodies producing these kind of guidelines, and policies that then go on to influence practices quite strongly. And an important thing to remember is, of course, these policies are evidence-based. Right? They are drawing on research that academics produce at institutions. And this is a go via these kind of policies. So we can track which of the academic outputs the policy documents are using, and then to an extent we can see, or at least we can put the policy document in context. We can say, you know, this is who produced it, this is how it gets used. Even if we can't promise that it's actually taken, put into practice. This is a bit more of a wildcard. I put this in just because we talk a lot about, or I think in presentations I tend to focus a lot on SDM examples. But actually other kinds of impact are things like popular non-fiction books. So if you think about, I don't know if anyone's read any of the books on this list. I like the top one, Mary Roach. I think the other two are very wordy. My favorite one is Gulp and Mary Roach. So she writes really good kind of popular pop sci books, if you like. But you know, you've got through them, there's a bibliography at the back, and it's all backed up. And seems to be scientists in the book and things. And this is a good way for some of these scientists who wouldn't necessarily get kind of wide exposure. Well, these books sell millions of copies to reach a lot of different people. Okay, it's not something that's picked up in citations. You wouldn't see what's got here and scopes, but it is a metric that is worth collecting. Is there any questions to that one? Sorry, I don't want to go too quickly. So I'll go quickly through some of this. Yeah, I'm going to deal with elementary.com products because that's what I work on. Like I said, there are other companies in the space. One of the things we try to do, first of all, is just encapsulate that attention. We do this with this donut and this attention store in the middle of it. I won't go into great detail, but it's important as a base for what we're about to see in a couple of slides' time. Basically, each article is represented by this donut, and the colors around the donut are a number of different sources. More colors, as we mentioned, more different sites. The number in the middle is just this measure of the amount of attention that your article has got. Not quality or impact, but attention. And it's used by, and you might see that a lot because it's used by a lot of publishers. So we work with, I think it's about 60 or 70 publishers now, about half as many again institutions. But as publishers where you tend to see the badges of the public, because the institutional products are more kind of inward facing, just for staff. Whereas for the publishers, tend to be on the article. So we work with a lot of big publishers here, like Francis, most recently Elsevier, Wiley, some of the quite broad spectrum of journals. And that's important because it gets people familiar with it, right? It gets researchers especially used to the concept of what is this donut, what's the number in the middle, and importantly also what do you do with the donut. What you do with the donut is you click on it, you get brought to the metric details page. The details page is basically the important bit. It shows you where all that attention is coming from. And this is how you get from the attention bit to the impact. Right? You can't really have a machine tell you this is the impact of stuff. Because you, first of all, it's a subjective decision. You need to know, what is the audience I care about, what's the impact I actually want. You decide how to look for it. And second of all, because different people. My final tangent, having said that the detail space is the most important bit, and you have to see the actual raw mentions, it's not just a number, is that, well, my confession, if you like, is that all metrics is a terrible name. It's a really bad name. It's too late now, because the company's called. But the reason it's terrible is because the two parts of it are misleading. Right? First of all, alt implies alternative, it's actually complementary to citations. Again, we're not saying stop using citations measures, it's more, there's more to this stuff than just citations. And then on the metrics part, that implies that it's a metric. You can look at a number and it's going to tell you something, you can just go ahead and use it, you don't need to look any further. But actually, these numbers aren't really metrics. For attention, they maybe a metric. But for impact, anyone who tells you they can measure impact with a number is lying to you, right? You can't really do that. You can indicate impact. We can show you where people are kind of on pathway to impact, but you can't measure it. All right, so I have some time.
You have 10 minutes.
7 minutes. No problem. All right, I guess I'll stop talking so fast. So finally, I want to show you how it's using our data. You know, in practice, how does this all come together? Well, so the quickest answer is how we're using it. They have specific questions. Usually, I'm going to list some of these questions around impact of attention. Our metrics they try and address. So I'll show you the tools in practice first, and then I'll show you the questions. So here, for example, I mentioned that we're working with publishers. I'll show you this example just to show you what it's like as a researcher to go and look for a single article. So this one's about using a UAV, like a remote control helicopter, or a skywalker, I've seen one of those, to measure the boundary layer of ozone concentrations. You see there's an allometric badge there. Sometimes publishers use this kind of square badge. It's one that says AN score down near the bottom instead of the donut. And if I click on that, I get the details page. Again, the details page is the most important thing. What does the attention score 4 tell you? Well, it tells you that it's had a lot more attention than 3/4 of the journal. But more importantly, where's the attention from? For example, it is from this policy document from the UK government, feasibility of area measurements of methane emissions from landfills. There's no photo there. So this article published in March by July is being picked up and put into policy. The reason I like this example is, well, first of all, having funded it, the person tweeted he had no idea that it was used in this way until they actually went through the measure. So, can we help these people? This, that person wasn't even aware there was a kind of policy implication to the research. We help people collect all the raw data they might need to kind of assess it, figure out if it's useful to them. Here's another example, less on the impact side and more on the public engagement. So this is a paper in scientific reports on nature communications, but it's one of the open access nature journals on the biological impacts of the pale species of butterfly, basically. And you see it's got quite a lot of attention. The last one we saw was in the top 25% of the journal by attention. This was in the top 5%. It's a big list of numbers down the side. Where does that attention come from? And there's a few interesting things. First of all, it's in a bunch of different news outlets. It's still quite a hot topic. The other one is mentioned by 1,859 tweeters. Yeah. And that by itself, the number is that useful. Well, you can say, well, that's far more tweeters than we normally get. I guess more interesting is if you start with demographics, the demographic breakdown of that data. And you can say, so this is data on the details page again. Well, the interesting thing is 68% of them come from Japan. That's unusual. And the other thing is that 77% of them are members of the public, rather than people who we see share rate research on. So is that then enough for you to say, well, that's evidence of public outreach? We reached some particular audience with that paper that ideally found useful. You need to go and talk to someone to see if they have, but it's definitely struck a chord with a particular demographic. And of course, for every Twitter account is followers as well. That's the people who share it, not necessarily people who follow them. So given those kind of examples, as a researcher or a research group, we can start to answer questions like, are reaching the audiences who want to see our work? It could be patient groups, it could be, again, particular demographic, it could be farmers, engineers, policymakers, MPs, sometimes we hear that from funders. Is anyone misrepresenting or confused about their work? That's another important use case that we shouldn't discount. So, sometimes people just get the wrong end of the stick by research. And maybe they're justified, maybe they're not, but as an author, it's useful to be able to be alerted to these kind of things. Let's go and answer. If you see a blog post that Says, no, this paper is terrible, because this mistake, the method section or whatever. As an author now, you see alert, so you can go and engage with those people if you want. How do we demonstrate that broader impact to our funder? So again, the idea is we've collected all the information in one place, we can make an assessment, we can make a human judgment. Is this something that I want to take out in my paragraph about? Are we engaging unexpected communities? I don't know if that the paper on machine butterflies is expected to be popular or not, but that's what it does. So that's on the single article view, and the data on a single paper is good. What's even better than one paper is looking at 4 million papers and trying to get a bit more trends from the data. And that's what we do with the Explorer product, the AFI product. And this is a little bit more similar to what Tom would do for Canon. They'd be there in this kind of space. So they're looking at one institution on everything. And with this Explorer, basically what we're doing is it's a database of all the papers we've got. You can search it in different ways. All the donuts, all the articles appear. Click on each one to go through the details pages before. Some summary reports as well. One of the interesting things that we've been able to do, because we've been part of digital sciences work in some of the portfolio companies. So for example, if you've got some Symplectic Elements instance, we can sync up with that, and then we can let you say within the Elementary Explorer, okay, give me a summary report for everything in the chemistry department, or in this custom group that is creating elements. We can track all the data you put on Figshare. So again, you can say, well, just specify, just show me all the things on Figshare, matching this keyword, or there are also elements, this kind of thing, get back and forth. Again, because different people want different things, it has to be quite flexible, and you can query the data in all sorts of different ways. I was putting this together last night, so I didn't have time to do it fancy, but for example, just doing a really quick affiliation search, this would be a terrible way to get other papers, and it relies on, you know, caveats. But pulling data from where Penn State is the affiliation string in PubMed, as we mentioned at least once on in a policy. I can pull back a report, and then from that report, I can pull out interesting data. So, you know, some policy documents, for example, that cite at least one piece of research that is in PubMed that has Penn State in the affiliation strings. And each one of these, obviously, if you go down to the details page, you see the context around it, you go to the original paper, contact the author, read the actual policy document, make your own assessment about whether or not it's interesting to you, and then kind of for So for administrators looking at a large set of data, then the questions are things like, are we in compliance with mandates from our funders, from government? Do the research outputs, are the things that are happening to our research outputs in line with what our mission is as an institution? Or on a smaller level, you know, a group or a partner. Does our campus have global reach? You know, where is it that is talking about our papers? And that's maybe not so much of an issue for some universities, but if you go campuses in different places, or you're in the APAC or something, you want to get reach elsewhere. And it's good to be able to see where people are talking about research papers you can pick out that are popular in India, that are being picked up a lot in Singapore. And then finally, there's our research influence policy and legislation and best practice, and that's really the policy document part of the tool. My final couple of slides are really just to fill out on that side and go back to the attention a little bit. So I can look article by article, filtering out different ways. I can also just stream the raw attention, right? Because we're collecting all the data on all those articles. That means every time there's a tweet about it, or a blog post about it, a news story, we're getting it and adding it to our database. So it is possible to say, okay, all I care about is the media attention that's going to the maths department, or this particular lab. You know, they've just released a set of papers, and I just want to watch them for a while. And every morning, just go on and get a report of what the new things happening online. So that kind of a press officer communications, but again, it could be someone embedded in the group. You know, again, is anyone getting out there getting it wrong, or people getting the wrong idea of the research we put out? Have we missed an opportunity to get in front of something potentially going wrong, or otherwise they kind of feed something, feed growing interest in an area or paper. We benchmark things we're doing for outreach. It's actually quite difficult to know. You can put out, select 4 papers out of 60 every month that do the press release for, but how do you know you're doing the right thing, reach out to the right journalists. And we're using the right media as well. It could be, certainly what we found is that different subject areas have different strengths in different sources, right? So I mentioned maths before. Not many people talk about maths on Twitter, but there is a very vibrant community of things like math, or closed communities, where they're talking about just one subject. So I'm going to wrap up there. The last slide is just to say that Altmetrics is a new field. It's not like everyone knows exactly how it should be done. We are certainly still learning from you guys, which is why it's good to come to events like this. And there's lots of opportunities not just to get involved with us, but also get involved with Altmetrics in general. First of all, there's a lot of research done. We give away all of our data for research. You can see come with a proposal, with PI name, this kind of thing. And there's tens of papers out there of different aspects of Altmetrics and how we put together use our data. There's a big standards initiative in the States at the moment going through with ISO, and anyone can get involved in it, it's not too late. We run a conference every year with the Wellcome Trust in the UK, and a bunch of publishers at the moment called, it was 1 AM last year, it'll be 2 AM this year. That again, you're very welcome to come to. We're always looking for the whole point of that is to bring people together and get them talking amongst themselves. And then finally, if you haven't already, as an institution, you should look into DORA, which is very difficult to Google. But if you use San Francisco DORA, it's easier. Which is a bit more of a high-level look at how impact factors and metrics are used for promotion and tenure and research success. Thank you very much. Yes, thank you very much.
So we are going to have that panel discussion later this afternoon, and Ewan will be on that. So if you have any questions, we can get those answered then. This way we can have our full lunch hour. We do have an hour scheduled for lunch, so it'll be served out where the rest of the breaks have been. I do also want to mention that we are live streaming this event, and a link to the recording of the event will be available to you, as well as the slides. So those of you that have been trying to take pictures and screenshots, I know it's difficult, you'll be able to get all of the materials from today's event as well. So with that, happy eating. And an hour, so if everybody can be back at 1:20, that would be fantastic. Or 13:20 for those of you in the UK. Thank you.
Yeah, I think she's still in the machine.
You all set?
Yeah.
Okay.